Every decade has its builders. The ones who do not wait for permission, who do not ask whether it has been done before, who look at what is broken and decide quietly that they are the ones who will fix it. Africa is in one of those decades right now, and the men building it are not always the ones in the headlines. They are the ones in the boardrooms and the construction sites, in the code and in the classrooms, on the phone at midnight closing the deal that changes everything. March is not a month, March is a verb, March is an action. It is what these men do every single day. This is Men of March.
My name is Obadare Peter Adewale. I'm the Chief Visionary Officer at Digital Encode Limited, and I'm also the most credentialized cybersecurity professional in Africa and the first professor of practice at MIVA Open University in Nigeria. I'm featured as Men of March 2026. To the very beginning, my name is Obadare Peter Adewale. As I've mentioned, I was born and bred in Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria, in a typical family of dad, my mom, and I have 5 siblings. I'm the second born and the second son. And in a typical family of not too rich of a Nigerian story. And growing up, I'll be honest, it wasn't that rosy. And that's how it all started from, in just a typical Nigerian basic family.
So what began your quest for success? What was it that began that quest?
My quest for success started from, just like I said, a typical not too rich. When I say not too rich family, it is loaded in Nigeria, because I grew up from, experiencing poverty. And when I mean poverty, yes, my mom really tried, and just to make sure we're okay. But the reality is, it's a family where, when you have, you don't have a standard 3 square meal. There will be some omission. Sometimes you have breakfast, no lunch, and then dinner. And then sometimes you have lunch and dinner, but no breakfast. So, and it was really, it was tough growing up. And because of that, a lot of things actually happened, because in fact, as far back as I think I was age 12, I was going with my dad to do labor work in actually outskirts of Ibadan. What I mean, farming labor work. So I never liked that kind of life. I believe it was, I was young, I was 12, and you have to, in fact, I remember, the memory was just flooding back. And I remember one day, I saw one big snake, and I'm like, wow, is this the kind of life? And I never liked it. It was so very uncomfortable for me. But something interesting happened in the year 1989. I became born again. And when I mean became born again, I used to go to church, typical, Christian, but I had an encounter giving my life to Christ Jesus, and it changed everything. It changed everything because I was exposed to be reading the Bible. And for the very first time, reading the Bible became very, very meaningful to me. And in the quest of reading the Bible, I saw so many great things God has done. I read the story of Joseph, how he was a prisoner, he became a prime minister, the story of Daniel, believing sincerely. So I became more curious about the secret of success. And that expanded my worldview. In fact, from that moment, the Bible became my frame of reference. And today, the Bible became the best book I've ever read. And I saw the possibilities that really God's success plan for his people is elastic. It just, in fact, from the Bible, I read that as far as you can see, you will have it. And that was it for me.
So from that 12-year-old boy that was going to do labor work with his dad, how did you eventually cross that path and begin your educational journey to the level that you are, where you're Nigeria's first professor of cybersecurity?
Awesome. It has never been a straight road, to be honest. When I mean straight road, I didn't even have a very normal path like every other person. In fact, when I finished secondary school, I had to take a pause. Pause in the sense that, in fact, don't forget, the background was we're not too rich. I'll be honest, I'll have to say this. My mom tried. I think I became very independent early. Independent in my thinking, independent in what I wanted for myself. So while my mom was telling me, no, we can manage, and she really tried and all of that, but I was like, no. So I joined some of my uncles, And we started to hustle very early in life. Hustling means, in fact, I paused my education to sell. I was selling on the bridge, selling on the bridge of Eko Idumata. Yeah, the same Eko Idumata in Lagos, Nigeria. So I came after secondary school, where if I've done farming, I've done houseboy. So in fact, from 1992 that I finished my secondary school, I didn't get to go back to higher institution until 1998. So that was like almost 6 years break. So because in that 6 years, I did houseboy, I was selling on the bridge of Eko Idumata, I did farming just to be able to get some money to be able to pursue my education. So interestingly, in that process, I got an admission to the University of Ife, right, for engineering physics. But unfortunately, the requirement for engineering physics, I couldn't meet up. So I had to, in fact, that admission was forfeited. And then I wrote Polytechnic JAMB again. It was in that moment I got an admission to Federal Polytechnic in Ede, Osun State, to study electrical electronics. So fast forward, I did my OND. I was already 25 years old after my OND. You can imagine, at 25, I was just having an OND. Came back to Lagos, and then was thinking all the next phase of my life, because I was already 25 with just OND. So it was in that moment of thinking, moment of meditation, that was when I told myself that, see, I sat down. Don't forget the background. I was already reading the Bible. I was already, purpose, vision was something that was already very, very clear to me. It wasn't something that it was strange because of the knowledge of the Bible. So it was in that process, thinking about my life, then when I told myself that I had to redefine education for myself. And redefining education for myself means that if you are 25 years old and you have OND, if I want to go and pursue, in fact, when I got back to Lagos, I got a direct entry admission to Lagos State University for BSc in Computer Science. But while going through all the dailies, I noticed that most of the entry-level jobs are for 28, 29, even as at that time, because I like to read. And I told myself that if I pursue these paths, I will already be 30, 31 before. That means nobody will be able to employ me. And that was when I actually left LASU in the portion of my BSc to start to do professional certifications.
How did you begin cybersecurity? And what made you decide that, okay, I think this is a path that can change the world?
See, most of your questions are actually very loaded because there's so many stories in between all of those decisions, right? So cybersecurity, why cybersecurity for me? I think the beginning of why cybersecurity was the beginning of my entrepreneurship journey, right? So don't forget, I said I had OND at the age of 25. And with OND, believe me sincerely, with the Nigeria, educational landscape and the kind of opportunity that comes for OND graduates, because OND means ordinary national, diploma. A lot of people, even the BSc graduate are still struggling to get place to work. So it was difficult. So in that process of time, I became an accidental entrepreneur. Accidental entrepreneur means that, it was first, I need to hustle, and because I've done hustle before, I've done, so it's something that comes natural, to me, and I'm like, okay, what can I do now? But it's just like, this is now different. It's different because it's not about now selling on the bridge, or because I already now have knowledge. I've read electrical electronics, and in the process of my internship, and I think that's one thing about the Polytechnic education, we did, it was called COS, Student Industrial something, I can't remember what COS means now. So that was when I was introduced to computer for the very first time in 1989. And that blew my mind that, wow, so there's another world, because in electrical electronics, there were options of power, telecommunication, control, and stuff like that. But in getting introduction to computer, I was like, wow, this is the path I wanted to follow. So fast forward, coming back to Lagos after my OND, I wanted to pursue career in that path. So, which was why I got introduced to professional certification in information technology. But I couldn't get a job. Why? OND. So I started to, so I became a system engineer. so to say, system engineer, because from the knowledge that I gathered from where I did my internship, I was copying system. So I've seen compact system, those days of IBM system, compact system. I saw the way those systems were. And in Nigeria too, a lot of people couldn't afford it. A lot of people. So there's the opportunity to start to clone systems, right? Cloning system means, people like us can go to Computer Village. There's a place called Computer Village in Nigeria. So you buy the motherboard, you buy the casing, you buy everything, all the requirements to have a complete system. And that was what I was doing. But because of don't forget, the spirit of excellence that I've read in the Bible. So I told myself that I want to have a system that is as good as a compact system because of that spirit of excellence. And I was getting good. I was getting good money for it. I'll clone a great computer system end to end, because I'll go to the market, buy the motherboard, casing, CD-ROM drive, hard drive. But I was buying top of the notch, quality grade materials for my customers. But then all of a sudden, that business. So it was the kind of hustling that I was doing, right? But then in that process, a lot of people get to know about, getting to couple systems as well. So the profit margin collapsed. In those days, when you couple one complete system, believe me sincerely, you can make as high as 100,000 naira, from one computer system that you clone, if you know what you're doing. But then all of a sudden, it collapsed to 10,000, 15,000 profit margin. But because of the curse too, I want to be the best of whatever I'm doing, I got introduced to networking. And that was how I became a Cisco engineer. I started to do certifications around Cisco, CCNA. So, and that was the introduction to Cisco internet networking, becoming a Cisco internet networking expert. It was a route. And that was how, of course, the journey to full-blown entrepreneurship then began. But it was not because I made up my mind I want to become an entrepreneur. It was accidental. And then, of course, got introduced to Faith Foundation, by one of my aunties, Chief Mrs. Naked Dina. She told me about Faith Foundation. So at Faith Foundation, that was, in fact, the word entrepreneurship then made a lot of sense to me. That wow. So, in fact, what Faith Foundation then did was to turn me into an accidental entrepreneur to a disciplined entrepreneur. So it was from there, what's your go-to market strategy and all of those kind of stuff. And I started to ask myself, the Cisco, at that time, in the year 2003, believe me sincerely, most of the companies doing Cisco businesses were big companies. Companies like ByTrax, companies like Weko System, companies like Computer Warehouse Group. Then, of course, Digital Encode was formed as a business name before limited liability company. And then guess what? You wanted to compete with. So when we bid for Cisco projects, the list of the companies you will see Computer Warehouse Group. You will see ByTrax, you see Weko System, you see Resource Group. And believe me, one good thing that God has done for me is I don't deceive myself. So I sat down again, just like I sat down in making decision after my OND. I say, Yoga, nothing will happen. You will, in fact, by the time, if you continue like this, by the time you are 60, you are going to remain poor. So it was in that process of time, that was when I stumbled on a particular book. In fact, it was just, everything has been accidental. Hacking, people breaking into system. And then it started from hearing the word information security and then cybersecurity. And I'm like, wow. So, and by the year 2005, don't forget my learning also from Faith Foundation, that's in carving a niche for yourself in business is very important. So those things were driving me to say, okay, if these big companies are building infrastructure, there'll probably be need for people that will secure it. And that was what changed the narrative for me. Then I started to do research, and I can be very inquisitive. So it was in the process of being inquisitive. Okay, we are managing some very small Cisco projects, but then I was like, okay. And then in 2005, the opportunity to train myself and my partner then to train some people in ethical hacking came from one of the top consulting firms in Nigeria. And that then opened the opportunity. In the process of that, I stumbled on a certification called from EC Council, Licensed Penetration Tester. I told myself that I'm going to get this certification. And by the year 2007, flew to India, and I went through the training of the licensed penetration tester by AC Council, and I became the first licensed penetration tester in Africa. And that was the beginning of cybersecurity for me and for Digital Encode.
What has changed between cybersecurity then and cybersecurity now in this age of AI?
But cybersecurity has actually changed over time. I remember when I first started cybersecurity, there's a lot of manual stuff we're doing. When I mean manual, I remember those days when you want to use a particular, because there's a need for, especially when you're doing penetration testing, we're doing vulnerability management, you want to identify weaknesses within the systems. Most of those processes, vulnerability management processes, penetration testing processes, were a combination of automation and manual. By a lot of manual, you have to compile codes, you have to, do a lot of hard work. But with the age of artificial intelligence, believe me sincerely, most of those repetitive tasks have actually been collapsed. So most of those tools today are easy to use. You just run. In fact, today we have tools that all you just need to do is if you put the IP address of the machine, and then it can run end-to-end, identify the vulnerability, and then do the penetration testing automatically and even give you a report. All you just need to do is just click and download the report. But prior to that time, there were a lot of manual stuff that we were doing. So AI is actually amplifying and bringing in a lot of innovation into both vulnerability management and penetration testing.
Miva made you the first professor of practice in cybersecurity. What does that title actually mean? And what exactly is the message that you pass on to current students of cybersecurity?
Kudos to Miva Open University for the initiative around professor of practice in Nigeria. They're the first set of university to actually do that. And the idea behind professor of practice is this, especially for cybersecurity. A lot of people have theoretical knowledge about cybersecurity. And the essence of professor of practice is to be able to bridge the gap between the gown and the town, right? So the gown means academic work. The town means, the town, practical experience, what is happening in the real world. So there is a need for that integration, and that's what professor of practice does. And that's actually why I became, Miva appointed professor of practice to make sure that, because you cannot, in fact, I tell anyone that is interested in cybersecurity, there are 3 major competencies that you need to be a successful cybersecurity professional. Number 1 is the cognitive competence. The cognitive competence comes from the theoretical knowledge, which you gain from academics. From academics, from certifications, all the theoretical knowledge, they are very good, they're fantastic. They have, you need them. They give you the foundation of what you need to do. But most of those theoretical knowledge, to be honest, most of the time, they are about what to do, right? But then they don't, you need how to do, which is what brings about the second competence that you need. From the cognitive competence, then you move to what I call functional competence. The functional competence has to do with skill, translating your theoretical knowledge to practical knowledge. And that's actually what professor of practice does, to make sure that, yes, whatever theory that you have learned, this is how to demonstrate them practically. If you want to do, depending on the area of cybersecurity that you are in, whether it is governance, risk, and compliance, because cybersecurity is actually a big domain area. It's not just about penetration testing or vulnerability management. There is computer forensics, right? There is the governance, there is the risk, there is the compliance side of cybersecurity. So it's like an elephant, right? So that's why you need those competency: cognitive competence, functional competence, and the last one is the social competence. And the social competence has to do with your behavior. Guess what? A lazy person can't do cybersecurity. A lot of people are struggling in cybersecurity today because they think, cybersecurity is just one of those practice that you can just jump on it and then suddenly you are going to start earning 6 figures. No. But if you want to be successful, it's very simple. It's like the tripod stand. You need the cognitive competence, which is the theoretical knowledge. You need the functional competence or your practical translating, practical knowledge, skill base, and then social competence, which speaks to integrity, your behavior, your consistency, perspiration, and all of that. So that's it.
Is Nigeria producing enough cybersecurity talent to protect its own digital economy?
That's a chicken and egg situation. But the truth is, in as much as I would say it's a chicken and egg situation, the answer is no. Yeah. So, and I'm going to explain. Because the more we churn out more cybersecurity talent in Nigeria, the more they find themselves outside Nigeria, to be honest. So that means that in fact, the statistically, there are not enough people that actually defend, cybersecurity talent that can defend the Nigerian cybersecurity space. But then there's this argument too, because I'm in a lot of forums, and then you hear people saying even people in Nigeria are not getting the cybersecurity jobs. So you see, I'm trying to justify why I call it chicken and egg situation, because some people are already frustrated that yes, I want to do cybersecurity, but I'm not even getting the job. And now I'm saying that there are not enough people that can secure Nigerian cyberspace. The challenge is this: most of those people that are even in Nigeria that are saying that they don't get the job is they don't have the right knowledge to do the job, and that's and it's very challenging. You understand? So because most of them think cybersecurity, with due respect, I wanted to say something very, very, very controversial now, but it's the truth. Cybersecurity is not content creation, and not to demean what content creators are doing. They are discipline as well. But cybersecurity is like, believe me, it's like you're doing medicine. When you're doing medicine, because you want to secure systems, so you need a lot of discipline to acquire the right practical knowledge to do the job. But most of those people I'm an employer of labor. I've seen people, even, people come for interviews and you ask them, you want to do cybersecurity? You ask them basic questions and they may flag to you that they have certification. But my challenge is, even those certifications that they said that they have, they can't even defend it. Not because the certification is a problem, but to me, I think the problem is, just like, the certificate, they've only have the paper, but they've not allowed to internalize the knowledge. So as a result, there is not enough people that can, and I think the employer of labor too are not helping matter. And what do I mean? People are struggling to train people right now. They're trying to train them because they're saying when we train them, they leave. Right? So nobody wants to train anybody. But what we have done at Digital Encode is very simple. We have a process in place that before you can work at Digital Encode, there is a contract. But the contract is mutually beneficial. We will train you, but you have to work with us minimum of 3 years. And it's optional. It's not mandatory. If you cannot work minimum of 3 years with us, we're not going to employ you. So what you now see is most of those young people too, they don't want to sacrifice. Some of them are looking for where they will pick a knowledge for 6 months, run away, and get another increment in salary. But it doesn't work like that. Which is why I'm now speaking to the discipline that if you want to do cybersecurity and be successful, it is not for lazy people. It is for serious-minded people. At the end of the day, that's the only way you can get the reward.
What are the main cyber threats that Nigerian organizations are most dangerously underestimating right now?
Right now, there are categories of threats that any organization, maybe we should start from there, can be exposed to, right? And those areas you look at, because when you talk about cybersecurity is about people, process, and technology. So the exposures comes in those 3 areas. What you see and what you have seen in most organizations is you see organizations that prioritize the use of technology, and when they think about cybersecurity, all they think about is technology, and then they undermine process and the people. Some organizations we so much prioritize people in terms of training their people and processes, and then they won't have the required technology. So as a result, they're exposed. So, but the only way you can have a good cybersecurity is to make sure that you never undermine any of them. You have standardized processes in cybersecurity. Train your people to make sure that if I call this cybersecurity intelligent quotient, and then have the right technology controls, from your perimeter security to endpoint security, application security, network security, to ensure that, in as much as there is nothing like 100% security, right? But then I call it appropriate controls. Appropriate controls means, the fundamentals. Because if the fundamentals are there, you will not make yourself the low-hanging fruit for cyber criminals. Yeah. So, but the challenge is most organizations violate these fundamentals. That's why they're exposed.
You are one of the men of March 2026. Nigeria men defining this decade for Africa. What do you want the next generation of African tech builders to take from your story?
Oh, great question. So I think for the African tech builder, my message to them is very simple, because that's what we have done. That's what I've done at Digital Encode. They should build with a global mindset. Yes, you might be in Nigeria, you might be in Africa, but build with the global markets in your mind, because I think now the challenge with a lot of African builders, because they build with the local mindset. So which is why most of the time today you see some of our stores are difficult to get exported to other places outside Nigeria or outside Africa. But if you build with global, for me, that's why for me, Digital Encode, I tell people that Digital Encode is a company that started in Nigeria, but we are servicing the world. It was our mantra from the beginning. And what does that mean? From the word go, we told ourselves that we want to be the best in cybersecurity. So because what if I find myself in New York today, I should be able to deliver the same value I'm delivering in Nigeria in New York. If I find myself in New Delhi today, I should be able to deliver the same value. If I find myself in Paris today, I should be able to deliver the same value. So having that global mindset, honestly speaking, it helps to drive value. And you know that value is it has no location. Value is not defined by your color. Value is not defined by your race. And that's actually what we have done. So they should build with global mindsets. And then also, they should build for the future. They should build for the long time. Because building for the long time ensure that you are not you delay gratification. Because what you see today, most tech builders, everybody, they get they get so excited about what is happening currently, and you see them lavishing money anyhow. Believe me sincerely, they need to build for a long time. Long time means, because nothing great is ever done in isolation. You need to think about your people, because as a visionary, as a tech founder, only you cannot do the job. And which means that you need to have processes, systems, structure in place that will make sure that you have people that is working with you, and taking care of those people. It's something that I've seen that is lacking. Because what you see is when you hear a lot of news about big tech startup, but then 2-3 years after, they squander the money, mismanagement, and all of that. It is because they're not thinking for a long time.